What's turned it around for you? So, you know, you have a good voting record on some things, you know, a less us side of the argument on other things. What's turned it around for you? What's made you come over to this side of the conversation that, you know, I live on personally, but GB News doesn't represent, but that's my view. What's brought you around?
Well, it's not about politics. I'm considered this hard right-winger by most people in Parliament, but this issue, when you're talking about the health of the population, and when policy is now to extend these experimental vaccines to children of the age of 6 months, where all the evidence from America testing on under 5 show that 1 in 100 will be seriously hospitalised over this.
But that is disputed.
It's not about right or left. This is about right and wrong. And
I get it. No, sorry, I'm with you. It is about right or wrong. You should not be throwing jabs in 6-month-old children.
But no benefits to them whatsoever.
But what I want to do is make sure that the argument is as solid as possible. That is disputed, that claim.
OK,
that it's 1 in 100.
The esteemed cardiologist, Dr Asim Malhotra, produced a paper which he presented in Parliament 3 months ago. It's been all around the world. It's had lots of coverage here and in the USA. There's been no scientific rebuttal of his claims that the vaccines are no longer effective. They're no longer necessary because you know, the virus attenuated itself a year ago to become the Omicron variant, which is a bad cold for most people. You'd have to vaccinate 7,300 over 80s to prevent 1 COVID death. Well, when you've got, by Pfizer's own figures, 1 in 800 severe adverse events, the harm you're doing by the vaccination is greater than the good. The risk-benefit, even for over 80s, is the wrong side of the equation. And for anyone under 40, countries like Denmark, a very sensible country, they've banned all vaccinations and boosters for anyone under 50. They've looked at the risk-benefit of the vaccine. We're not.
How deep do you think this rabbit hole goes?
Well, let's find out. But at the moment, the mainstream media won't even look into it.
Why is that, do you think? Because I was just going to say, I was going to have a human rights lawyer on this evening from the Bad Law Project, and just before we went on air, she was advised by her chambers that she wasn't to appear because there would be repercussions should she do so. So it is very difficult to talk about this issue. And for me, what that instills
means we must talk about it.
Is that we've got to talk about
Absolutely.
it. And why are we so scared of it? But what are we doing here? What do you want to achieve?
Well, there are some bad actors in all of this. I've been approached by very senior executives of other esteemed news organisations, and they've said, yep, we know it's a huge problem, I'm well aware of it, and yet if I discussed it in my office, I would fear I'd lose my job. This is not a free press in this country. We're suppressing silence on vaccine harms and the risks around the vaccine. It's more contagious than COVID-19 ever was.
Well, exactly. And Rishi Sunak has said, I believe these vaccines are safe, right? Then, confronted with a new set of evidence and new sets of data, why is Rishi Sunak not updating his
He'll be
model?
taking advice from his advisors. There's a lot of money involved in all of this, and there's a lot of political capital being invested by people in all of this. But at the end of the day, I think if anyone looks at the data, and we have any sort of investigation at all, it's clear that the rollout of these mRNA experimental vaccines should be suspended. And they're still on an emergency authorisation. I'm absolutely convinced the reason they're still on emergency authorisation, despite we've 3 years into this supposedly having known about COVID-19, is because if they were approved for general usage, the analysis that has to happen of adverse effects would mean they'd be shut down within a week. You know, in 1976, the swine flu vaccine was withdrawn for 1 in 100,000 adults having Guillain-Barré syndrome as a result. In 1999, the rotavirus vaccine was withdrawn because 1 in 10,000 children had a reaction and got a bowel obstruction.
And we've got 500,000.
So we've done it. We've withdrawn vaccines before, but no one could ask any questions about these mRNA vaccines. I mean, effectively, the AstraZeneca vaccine has actually been withdrawn.
We've got 2 ways of looking at this. For me, you got Mark Twain. It's easy to fool people. It's harder to convince them they've been fooled, or we go, the vaccine has saved more lives. And I am very grateful to you for making sure that this is a mainstream public debate held in the most important democratic house in this country. Andrew Bridgend, thank you very much for joining me this evening.
Thank you for having me on.
Right, thank you, Andrew Bridgend, Conservative MP for North West Leicestershire. Coming up.